Yeah, so I could do anything midday if you wanted.
Yeah, like I said, I'm wide open until 3.
Just name it.
Okay, welcome to the MSAD 51 school board meeting for Monday, September 19th, 2022. I'll call the meeting to order, and we have everybody here except for Jared, Mike, and Christina, who are away, but we do have a quorum. Okay, so next item is recognition. We have nothing formally, but I did want to mention I visited the new Historical Society building, that was moved, the brick building, and they have a fantastic display on until December that has like MSAD 51 and the old MIW and back when it was the Greeley Institute, and that's really cool. So I encourage you to bring kids there and browse through that, and the interior is fantastic now. And then I also just wanted to say kudos to the football team and how awesome it was to go to a game under the lights on a Friday night. So, item number 3, approval of minutes for September 8th. Any edits? Okay. Any motion?
I motion to approve the minutes of September 8th, 2022 as presented.
Thank you, Vanessa. Second.
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed and abstain? Unanimous, motion carries. Okay, thank you. All right, so this brings us to item 4, public comment. Are there folks here that would like to speak? Please stand up, introduce yourself. Speak up.
Hi.
Hey, Grace.
Do I speak from here?
Right with them. Yes, please.
All right. Just like that?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, Superintendent Porter and members of the board. My name is Grace Wright. I'm a parent in the district and by profession a licensed clinical social worker who spent the last 10 years practicing as a trauma therapist, encompassing individual trauma, collective trauma, and historical trauma, i.e. systems of racism, marginalization, and oppression. I'm here tonight to speak about equity. First, I want to speak to the concerning focus of the board chair and newly appointed equity committee co-chair. Both have suggested that equity work should focus on a, quote, growth mindset in order to not create a victim mentality. First, I can say unequivocally that in my 10 years of direct experience with people who have experienced trauma and in all of the research, there's no evidence that validating someone's experience in a marginalized population has ever created a victim mentality. What we do know is that when we validate that someone has a harder hand to play because of their history or their identity, we acknowledge their reality, validate their existence, and allow them to be seen. From there, we can work to support them in success. It's an established and undisputed fact that children of color, children who identify as LGBTQIA+, and children who live in poverty have harder hands to play. The concept of, quote, growth mindset is yet another racist theory that serves to tell these kids, if you tried harder, you could succeed. Frankly, growth mindset is a diversion that people are using to avoid having to do the work that needs to be done in dismantling these systems of racism. It's a cop-out born of immense privilege. Second, I want to quote one and only one statistic in response to the board chair's comment at the last meeting that the policy relating to kids being able to use their preferred pronouns is under exploration. Transgender and non-binary youth who reported having pronouns respected by all or most of their people in their lives attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected. Finally, I want to bluntly speak to the members of the board who ran and were elected on promises to do equity work. Anne, Tom, Kim, Leanne, and Mike and Christina, who are not here. You've all made promises to do this work, and you were decisively elected to the board to do so. The community is clear that equity work matters, and yet you've allowed the board chair to remove student members of the previous equity committee who represented diverse populations and a parent with a PhD in equity education. You allowed 2 members who lost recent elections to be appointed to the committee after the community was clear that they did not want them representing our students and families. You've made statements to members of the public that your intentions are to block any work by the new equity committee, but I'm here to say that's not good enough. You have the numbers and you have the power to do better. Require the board chair to entirely change the committee and to represent people who will do the work of equity, who will diversify the committee, and actually represent the populations we're trying to serve. And should you need to, I will point out that you have the ability to vote to remove and replace the current board chair should he not be serving the best interest of our students and our families. You were not elected to sit back and play a political game. You were elected to do the work of equity to protect our students, staff, and families who need you the most. The mental health and well-being of our students is quite literally in your hands. And if these aren't your own children that we're fighting for, I would ask you to start acting like they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Just one point. I don't need to get into debating all of that. I appreciate everything you said. On policy JB from the last meeting, I used the word explored, but don't read into that. There's been zero discussion of changing that policy. It was simply to ask for time for it to be reviewed. Reviewed would have been a better word than explored. And I understand that word has some ambiguity. There's been zero discussion of changing that at this point. So, others? In a moment, if you want to come up, yeah.
I mean, I don't mind. Okay. Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm here also to voice my support for the Equity Committee, and I agree wholeheartedly with what Grace has shared. Along these lines, I'd also like to address the oversight now for the second year in a row of the district in planning significant school events on the Jewish high holidays, in this case on Rosh Hashanah. Aside from the initial disappointment and frustration of feeling like my kids and other Jewish students are not being met with inclusivity from their public school administration, the district's official response in last week's email was shockingly dismissive. It read like a message that would be sent to placate parents who were complaining about a school event conflicting with a soccer tournament or some other extracurricular activity. The Jewish holidays are not extracurricular activities. What could have been an opportunity, for instance, for a sincere apology and a pledge once again to do better, instead sent the message that the administration can't be bothered to worry about and respect a few critical dates for their Jewish students. I imagine the sentiment would feel similar for Muslim students and other minority groups as well. This is not about my kids, nor is it about a single field trip. This is important for all the families in our district who identify as part of a minority culture or religion. We all deserve to be included. And actually, this is equally important for our students who will never experience this sort of exclusion because they celebrate the major holidays, they look like most of the other kids, they're able-bodied and cisgender and heteronormative. It's important for all of our students to see modeled that there's beautiful diversity within our community and to have the opportunity to respect the traditions, cultures, and lived experiences of their peers. There is certainly a long list of issues that the Equity Committee needs to address, and I hope that this is just one small one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Others?
Hi, my name is Lorian Witten, and I am a member of this community. I also have a child in the school system, and I'm also a mental health therapist in private practice. I've been working with teens and young adults for about 20 years, 10 being in private practice, but most of the bulk of my life has been to work with teenagers. And at this point in time in my practice, I almost solely work with people who identify as part of the queer community. And I have students currently and in the past that have gone to the Greeley school system and have worked at times really applauding what teachers have done for them, using their correct names, preferred pronouns, and then at times really trying to help when that has not happened. And they come into my office feeling really ashamed, embarrassed that they, maybe during the roll call in the morning, the teacher uses a name that they don't use anymore, and maybe other students didn't even know that they had ever had that name. And so now they are basically called out they are bullied because of that, and feel really terrible about themselves. And so that obviously leads to more depression and self-harm, suicide ideation, and sometimes suicide attempts, which I have actually had from this Greeley school system. So luckily no completed suicides, but there's definitely been hospitalizations. So I really just implore that we really just think about trying to take care of all students and how they identify, and making sure that this is a safe place for them to be, because sometimes home is not. Thank you.
Well said, thank you. Others?
Okay, I've never done this before, so bear with me. I did have a question about the difference between review and explore, and if nothing's going to change, why it needs to be reviewed.
Some of our policies are long, and you don't read them every single day, so when things come up, you got to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. And that was it, asking for time.
My name is Jessica Witten. I am a resident of North Yarmouth, a parent of a child in the district, a Greeley graduate, and a member of this community. I've been a psychotherapist for 17 years. And over these 17 years, I have treated children, adolescents, and adults with a myriad of diagnoses and symptoms. And while they're all unique, there's one common thread that runs throughout the pain, suffering, and healing, and that is a desire for belonging and acceptance. I know at this point you've heard and read the statistics around suicide rates of marginalized populations. I know you're aware of the dangers involved with not protecting our youth who identify with one or more of these groups, and I trust that you're all intelligent, capable humans. However, there seems to be some confusion around the difference between the words resilience and trauma. I'd like to take a moment to explain the difference and the implications of each. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. This can include something from a young child struggling to learn to tie their shoes and failing multiple times before finally making those bunny ears, or losing a big game and needing to work harder next season, or perhaps learning the hard way that procrastination doesn't pay off in the end. This builds character, tenacity, and grit. I respect this as a part of the mindset and encourage it to be part of our district's ideology. Trauma is a deeply distressing and disturbing experience that has long-lasting negative impacts to the psychological well-being of the person. Trauma is what can cause chronic and severe mental illness, harm to others, harm to self, and harm to our communities. Trauma can include a sense of horror, helplessness, serious injury, or the threat of serious injury or death. This can be in the form of physical, sexual, or domestic violence, natural disasters, grief, and of course, bullying. It may be hard for some of you to understand how something seemingly trivial as not honoring pronouns or an off-the-cuff slur may lead to what I described above. If that's a challenge for you, I'm going to guess that you are not and never have been a part of one of these marginalized populations, and you're unable to fathom how these seemingly minor experiences lead to trauma, not resilience, trauma. I don't expect everyone to have experienced this, but I do expect that if you have not, you trust those of us who have. It's not just a word, it's not just a protection, it's not just inclusivity. It's where it begins. It's the message we send to our children in this community. It's the tone we set in our buildings. It's creating a sense of belonging, a sense of acceptance. It's telling these kids that they are safe and that the only thing they have to do when they come to school is learn and do their best. No brain is capable of doing their best when it is in fight, flight, or freeze. I don't expect you to be able to put yourself in their shoes or even to pretend that you know what it's like to feel isolated, outcasted, or less than based on your race, gender, sexuality, or gender expression. What I do expect is that you're able to provide every child that walks through our district doors to feel like they belong, to provide them with a sense of safety and community. I would love to have my child and yours know what it feels like to belong, to foster growth and resilience for our students. Without a sense of equity and inclusion, we are only fostering more trauma. I'm speaking here today to ask you to please, as you set your equity committee agenda, to ask yourselves, which do I choose? What do I want my legacy to be? Do I want to create a sense of healing, safety, and belonging? Or do I want to perpetuate this trauma? Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, my name is Vi. I'm a student here. So anything that happens in this room will directly affect me. I don't really have anything prepared to say. But when I hear slurs thrown around in the hallways, it's not going to toughen me up. When people don't use mine and other preferred pronouns, it's not going to prepare me for a harsh, cruel world. It is just going to continue to tell me and other LGBTQ kids that we are not enough and that we will never find a place where we are accepted. It will continue to tell us that we don't deserve respect and love, and putting that type of energy and allowing people to continue that form of hatred is not going to create a safe community for everyone. And I don't want to go to a school where I'm not going to be safe, respected by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Liza Batchelder. I am a North Yarmouth resident. I have my 2 older kids are in the district. I'm don't have a lot of great prepared remarks, but hats off to everyone who has spoken because that was amazing. And I want to ask now the chair, in light of all of these concerns that are being voiced, is there any chance that we might see the Equity Committee expanded again to the numbers that we had last year? Thank you.
Before we wrap up this topic, is there others that would like to speak on it? Go for it.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize, I was late. I couldn't find the Geiger room. My name is Mandy Levine. My pronouns are she, her. I am a resident of Cumberland, and I have kids who are freshmen, as well as a 5th grader. And I am here to implore that the Equity Committee continue to embrace the importance of gender pronouns. I am a cisgender heterosexual woman. I am not part of the LGBTQ plus community, but I'd like to think that I act in the capacity of an ally to it. Every year I facilitate the A World of Difference program at the middle school for the 7th and 8th grade, and I can say in the numerous years that I have facilitated that program with a group of peer leaders that the aspect of identity that uniformly comes up as the reason that these students are the most routinely bullied is because of their sexual orientation, and heard some really tough stories over the years of what these kids have gone through. And I just today got an email from the Trevor Project. It's Suicide Prevention Month, and I apologize if this was covered before I walked in the room, but LGBTQ plus youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. I just read a really startling statistic today, and I don't want to misquote this, so I'm going to read it because I wrote it down. If an LGBTQ plus youth has one adult, a single adult in their life who loves and accepts them, they're 40% less likely to try to attempt suicide. That number to me is so startling, and for me it just reinforces how critically important it is that we create a school environment for all of our kids where they feel welcome, where they feel safe, where they have a sense of belonging. It is such an easy gesture for me to introduce myself with my pronouns. It doesn't mean a whole lot to me, but when I say it to someone who is part of that community, it is such a powerful signal to them that I respect them, I include them, I want them to feel safe with me. It's a tiny gesture I can do to embrace inclusion and belonging, and I just hope we can continue this conversation. I really thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandy. I'm sure that I can't answer all the questions of this. I agree with so much of what was said here tonight, and this is obviously a passionate topic. Since the time that the draft committee list came out, I did add some folks that reached out, and the current committee is 10 people, and 5 of which are returning members. And the process that I followed is exactly by policy. And I understand the exact makeup is, not to some people's liking, but I would ask you to reach out to the members, all of them, and have conversations with them. I think some of the concerns that were said here tonight, you would find that you agree wholeheartedly. I would ask you to reach out to them and have conversations. And then belonging and inclusion actually are words that are in our draft goals for this year. So I appreciate that. Slurs, if there's slurs, please report them. Honestly, go to administration. That shouldn't be happening. Any other public comment before we move on down the agenda?
I appreciate just, trying to empower students to report. I think what happens, though, is that if we have a community that is set up where kids aren't feeling like they're actually getting support, or it's not actually an inclusive kind of community, then they're not going to actually feel even okay to go and report it, because they feel like they are outside of what the norm is. And so I guess I ask more that we need to change our culture in the schools so that other people are also standing up for those kids who are getting slurs, that the teachers, that people are just coming together, that this doesn't happen. Again, I hear empower the students, go report it, but it's much more invasive than that. We have to get to the root issues, which means we have to create a better community.
Thank you.
I promise we don't plan to do this all night. However, I have to speak to some of the same thing, is that your response involves us reaching out to the committee and students reaching out to the administration. The onus is not on us. The onus is on the committees. The onus is on the administration. The onus is on the students. The other students, the teachers, the faculty, the school board chair, the committees. The onus is not on the people who are trying to fight for these rights. The responsibility is on those who are creating these policies and procedures.
Agreed. There was a suggestion more to help alleviate concerns and share ideas and stuff. So.
First, I want to say, Jason, I appreciate your willingness to have conversation. I think that says a lot about your leadership. I will also say that I commend the type of leadership that you are using. I don't agree with it. You don't have the numbers on the board to support your version of equity. The 6 people who were elected on equity do, and I applaud the fact that you are leveraging your position and your ability, your powers, because you are within your powers to elect that committee however you want. So I give you total credit. I'm looking at the 6 on the board who were elected to do the equity work. I think you and I both know that the person that you appointed as Equity Committee co-chair lost an election on an equity platform, and the person who won that election is sitting in a seat up here on the board. He is somebody who I have questioned in depth. I would argue that there's not going to be anything that comes to light other than this growth mindset is really just a racist term to say to these kids who have the deck stacked against them. if you try harder, you can do it. You can succeed, right? But the deck for a white, cisgender, heteronormative, Catholic, wealthy male is not the same deck that a black child or an LGBTQ child, a trans child, a queer child has. Those are just not the same decks. They're not starting from the same point, and every statistic in the world will validate that. So I'm looking to the 6 of you sitting on the board. I've run with Robert's Rules of Order. You have the power to vote to overturn the board chair and replace the board chair. You can't remove him from the school board, but you can take away his power and you can do the equity work correctly. And I'm looking at you to do that because you have the numbers. It's 6 versus 3. I think everybody in the public knows that. So Jason's playing a savvy game, and I respect that, and that's an honest, true comment. I respect it, but I don't agree with it. So the 6 of you need to do the work. Thank you.
I'm curious to know what the 6-3 ratio is at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, Kim, Ann, Leanne, and Christina, and Mike, who are not here, all ran on the platform. Promising they would check the work.
Okay, we're not going to keep doing this back and forth. Nope. I've heard everything you say. I appreciate it.
I'm just
it's great input.
very,
No, this is not a game to me or anybody. I
I'm just
assure you.
disrespected entirely for you not even to know what my platform is. And it's extremely disrespectful on where I stand.
Okay, everybody here that wanted to speak on equity has spoken. Is that true? Okay. No, please sit. There's a policy of 3 minutes, and I've extended that to the degree that I'm willing. Okay. All right. Others that would like to talk during public comment? Okay. Moving on down the agenda, item 5, presentations from our district leadership team. SIPs. Julie, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Take it away.
So good evening. I'm Julie Olson, Director of Instructional Support, and I'm actually speaking on behalf of myself and Susie Robbins, Director of Academic Services. I think Susie's pulling up. Yep, she did. We have a co-SIP this year, which is similar to previous years for those of you that have followed the last few years. Between my role of instructional support and Susie's role of academic services, we really capture all students. So we capture students under special education, Section 504, ESLL, gifted and talented, regular education. Every student falls under one or both of us, and so we partner very closely to support all students and all teachers in our work, and so it makes sense that our SIPs combine to do that work. So as you can see on the top, I can't really see the screen, so just bear with me, Susie, as you scroll down while I talk. It's instructional support and academic services. We're really looking at supporting the academic, mental health, and social emotional learning of all of our students, and connecting this to our strategic goal of every student college and career readiness with a foundation in teaching and learning. So our data supporting this is really looking at non-categorical supports for students, academic and behavior, looking at sort of the wellness committee that has been the last few years and has really morphed more into the mental health ad hoc committee, as well as the work in that, and then our current response to intervention systems of supports that's in place. And we really are looking at, there has been a pretty large pause in the last couple of years due to COVID around our response to intervention. We have really been, as you all know, just keeping afloat in terms of remote services and then hybrid services, and then getting back to some normalcy. And so our 2 goals really look at academic RTI and behavioral RTI, and those really span across all grade levels and all students and all staff. The academic RTI really looks at, we had a 3-year RTI plan, which ended up being a 5-year RTI plan due to COVID, and it was time to relift that and look at setting goals for the next 3 years and where we needed to go. We have begun that work this summer with a group of our RTI leaders and administrators in the district, and taking feedback on sort of what's been working and where we need to go. And then including sort of updating all of the essential standards for that work in our academic RTI work. And then behaviorally continuing to work with both regular ed and special education staff to continue to provide non-categorical supports and interventions for all of our students who demonstrate any sort of interfering behavior, whether that's internal or external behaviors that interfere with either their own learning or the learning of others. And so continuing that work across our pre-K through age 22 students that are accessing, so not just sort of K through 12, right, but we have students who span all of those ages in our building, so 4 to 22, both academically and behaviorally across all of those grade levels with our adults and students. So I'll open questions, and then if there's anything that Susie needs to answer, she'll pop up.
Questions for for Julie? Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Absolutely.
So,
Sure. Wait, Susie, can you put mine up? Thank you. Okay. So the areas that my site improvement plan pertain to is everything that relates to finance, human resources, and operations. And the areas that are the goals that I have for the site improvement plan is the first would be the successful planning for financing, a financing plan on the building project. Successful referendum and bonding new primary school project as well. So related in the finance area, mostly to the bonding in that. And that would be through the use of, the facilities, building committees, the board, and also working with bond counsel and our financial advisor to do that. So, and we had a meeting recently in which a plan of financing was presented, and it seemed well received. So. The other areas in human resources, and during the budget process, we created a new human resource position for the central office, and we're looking to consolidate human resource functions all into one position. Right now, it's spread across 4 people in the office, so we're looking to centralize those and streamline our human resources processes. The area of operations and transportation, we're looking more greening of our bus fleet, and so we're looking at the purchase of electric buses, and we've already had an electric bus demonstration at the bus garage, and we're hoping to make that part of our next purchases, is to move towards electric vehicles. Excuse me a minute. The other area around facilities is to assist in the oversight and planning of the construction of the new primary school. That's probably the overwhelming goal going forward. Update our 5-year capital plan. That's all the summer work that goes on every summer. You see all the work around the campus and the upgrades to the facilities. We'd like to upgrade that plan through the through the finance committee and through our facilities committee. One area that should help us out this year is there's another round of revolving renovation funds that are coming up, in which, if you remember, those are interest-free, and also about half of that principal is forgiven if we can acquire that through our state application. And we'd be looking at trying to apply for things for Greeley High School, such as HVAC improvements, so that maybe we can get some air conditioning down in the other end of the building, better air quality, even though there's nothing wrong with the air quality now, okay? We're looking to improve it and add AC. And also address areas of windows and some of the envelope of the building, doors and windows. So those are the areas that are in site improvement plan for finance, HR, and operations.
thank you, Scott. Questions for Scott? Okay. Thank you.
Actually, sorry. One did occur to me. It's about the revolving funds.
Yes.
Are there limitations on how frequently we can apply for those?
They have cycles that come up from time to time that we can apply, and we take advantage of every cycle that comes up.
Okay.
So,
and are we at any disadvantage because we received funds for
no, the rating cycle is treated just like the previous cycle, and so the next cycle ends in 7 weeks. So we've got a little bit of work to do over the next few weeks to get our application in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so move down presentations. B, an enrollment update from our superintendent.
All
right, good evening. I'm here this is something that I do annually about this time. We wait for school to have gotten settled for a couple of weeks, and then I give you an idea about what our student enrollment looks like. The state does not actually certify our enrollment, or I don't certify the enrollment and give it to the state until the middle of October. It's called the October 1st account, and that is the actual enrollment count that the state requires each year, and then they use it for state subsidy purposes. But I can give you a pretty close to accurate number of students that we have and kind of walk you through that process. So Planning Decisions is the company that in 2016 the district hired along with the town of Cumberland and North Yarmouth to do a joint study on our enrollment projections going forward. They also did the study in 2019, and then we hired Rebecca Wandell, who was a staffer at PDI, and she has continued that work, and in March 2022, she provided to us an updated enrollment study. So all three of these studies, and I know I'm just summarizing, debunk the 2009 studies. There were two of them done back then that showed that we were looking at declining enrollment in MSAD 51. So these are factors that impact enrollment in a school district, and certainly in ours. The kindergarten class that comes in every year is a very important number. We always look at that number very carefully. We start looking at that number. The number of registrations for kindergarten begin in February, and we begin tracking that number all the way through the summer, right to the first day of school. Outgoing senior class. Do we have an outgoing class that is a small class or a large class that impacts our overall enrollment? The number of new housing units in the district. How many new housing starts are being given in each of the two towns? We look at those numbers. Turnover housing sales, number of houses that are selling in the community. That's a very important number to us. Obviously, there are more houses selling right now than there have been in many years in many communities. Private and charter school enrollment. How many students are going to private schools every year? How many students go to charter schools from our district? Homeschooling students. How many students are being homeschooled? Superintendent agreements are agreements made between two superintendents. Those agreements basically say a student can go to another district than the one they actually reside in, and both superintendents can say yes. If one of them disagrees, then the Commissioner of Education breaks the tie. Transfers in and out would just be regular student moves. You know, students move in between towns and states and whatnot. We get a lot of students actually from out of state that move into our district. The reputation of the school district, that actually does play into it somewhat. Many people tell us that they move here because of the schools, among other things. And then finally, the economy and the housing market. What does the economy look like? If the economy is good, we tend to have an uptick in the number of students. This is an interesting statistic. When the economy is not so good, people try to move closer to Portland. For some reason, we have a group of people that will do that. So you'll find that in most areas that have a city and then suburbs. So this is information that comes right from Rebecca Wandell's March 2022 latest report. And it shows the number of resident births. This used to be the ingredient that we would look at when we were looking at student enrollment, would be the births that are to residents in the two towns. We know now that this is only a fraction of the information that is available that we should be looking at, but it is certainly an important variable nonetheless. So you can see starting in 2005, and going all the way through projections, or I'm sorry, 2021-22, which was the last school year, you can see that the birth rates pretty much showed exactly what our enrollment in our school district, or some sort of a parallel, where we went down and then we've gone up, and we've generally been maintaining since 2014-15 or so. Likewise, we look at new housing units in both towns. So in Cumberland and North Yarmouth, you can see that the housing units that were approved in both towns had been, in 2004, there had been a lot of housing units, up to a little bit over 90, and then they dropped way off by 2010, which was when the recession was in full bloom. And you'll see that those new housing units dropped below 20 in both towns. This represents both towns. And then by 2012, 2013, those housing starts had gone back up above 70, up to about 75, dropped a little bit, and then you'll see a huge spike in 2015 through 17, where those new housing units were over 100 in both communities. And then up and down a little bit, and then somewhat maintained since then. So it kind of gives you an idea roughly of two very important ingredients then when we look at enrollment. And if you look at the pre-K-12 enrollment since 2011, you'll see that that has often paralleled those two pieces that I was just talking about. So with 2,100 students in 2011, the enrollment certainly took a peak, took a dive for several years, although it wasn't as impressive as a dive as the two studies in 2009 forecasted. And then the enrollment started to stabilize around 2016, 2017, and then it has started to increase since then, which is exactly what our school enrollment is mirroring, basically the projections that PDI started to forecast back in 2016. And with the latest enrollment projection of March of 2022, you can see that the enrollment will be projecting to go up until 2031 and to about 2,600 students or so. So there's three different lines. You'll see a pink line, you'll see a line above that which is dotted, and then you'll see kind of like a road marker line below that. Rebecca Wandell in March 2022 said that she was not 100% sure because of the COVID variable what exactly is going on with enrollment. So the pink actually represents an adjustment based on COVID. So was COVID going to reduce the number of students that she was forecasting? That was basically her COVID adjustment. And then the line that's dotted above that is the projection without COVID being a variable. And I'll show you a little bit more in just a moment. Specifically, Mabel I. Wilson School, which has had over 200 students since 2016 added to that school. You can see again that the enrollment, and this goes back to 2009, those studies. At first, those enrollment projections, especially at the primary school level, dropped somewhat and then started to stabilize and then started to increase by 2016-17, which is exactly what we've been seeing at Mabel I. Wilson School. And then it has generally been increasing and is expected to continue increasing and then stabilize over a period of time. Again, the pink line represents the COVID adjustment that Rebecca wasn't sure about in terms of the 2.5-year COVID ordeal that we're glad that is over. And just what has it done to those numbers, she wasn't sure. So those are things that she certainly cautioned the district to continue exploring for the next couple of years as we look at our enrollment and see if we've recovered. So this is what our current enrollment is. Looking a year back to October 1st of 2021, this is the state certified enrollment. And I'll just go through this very quickly. We had 713 students a year ago on October 1. And Rebecca Wandell's latest report to us projected 741 students, which would be the COVID adjusted projection. So it's important to distinguish. There's two projections I'm giving you from her report. The COVID adjustment, which is 741, and then she gave another projection, which was 770, with no COVID adjustment in that number. She also provided some other models, but those were the two that were really significant in her March 2022 report. Our actual numbers as of today are 762 students at Mabel I. Wilson School, so you can see that we're certainly over the COVID adjustment number that she projected and slightly under the normal or typical enrollment had we not had COVID, is basically what she's saying. So the 1 year change from a year ago is an increase of 49 students at Mabel I. Wilson School. So again, if you follow the same trend, 323 students at GMS 4-5 a year ago. Rebecca's COVID adjustment projection was 307, and she also had the same exact number for no COVID impact at 4-5, and our actual is 317 students, and we're down from 1 year ago by 6 students, but we're actually up on the projections. That's another way of looking at it as well. At 6-8, 464 students a year ago. Rebecca projected 481 students using the COVID adjustment. She also projected that for no COVID adjustment, and the actual is 478, and that is up 14 students over last year and down 3 students from her projections. And at the high school, 602 students a year ago. She was projecting 594 students with or without COVID, and we actually have 602 students, so there is no change. COVID or no COVID, we have the exact same number of students enrolled at the high school this year. So if you look at the total numbers pre-K through 12 across the board, you'll see that we're up 57 students from a year ago, and Rebecca projected with a COVID adjustment 2,123 students, and then with no COVID variables involved 2,152 students, and we have just slightly beaten both of her latest projection, which would have been no COVID variable. We beat that projection as well, so 57 students more. The homeschool, private, and charter school enrollment numbers are interesting to look at.
Sorry, Jeff, can I just interrupt with a question?
Go ahead, Tom. Yep.
I'm sorry if I missed this before. Rebecca's projections, those are, she's projecting as of the snapshot date, October 1st, correct?
Yes, the certified enrollment is what she projects.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you have a sense of what the typical variation is between early mid-September and the October 1st snapshot?
By now, we're into week 4 of the school year, so the beginning of week 4. We will see almost no variability. It might be 5 to 10 students at the most. We've cleaned up all of our records at this point. We've sent records to students that we have found actually did move, or students that have moved in since, didn't register at the beginning of the school year, happened to register afterwards. So the number between this time in September and October 1st, very little changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great,
We're pretty much settled by this time in the month. So these numbers won't be a huge difference. If I reported these numbers, or if I did this report at the last board meeting, which was, I think, the 4th day of school, I'm trying to remember what day, 4th or 5th day of school, you would definitely see variability in those numbers. And I pulled those numbers actually starting the first day of school for the first few days. And they were higher than these numbers. And that happens every single year until we clean up all of our records and send the records where they need to go. So we don't assume students aren't coming until we know for sure they're not coming and they moved. And that's usually what happens.
Okay.
So these numbers should be pretty solid for October 1st.
Since you came back to this slide, can I have
Sure.
one
Yeah,
more
go
question?
ahead.
Is the increase at MIW, that 49, is that pretty much spread out across all the grades, or are you seeing a particular grade that really has much larger numbers than others? I'm just wondering if there's a bubble and where that might be.
The bubble, it is all over the place, but we have a smaller kindergarten class this year than we did last year.
Okay.
But that is like an every other year thing. But we still, what we call a small class, 174 students in kindergarten, is far exceeding any numbers that we used to see in kindergarten. We were at the 130 mark at our low counts for kindergarten. And we had years of 130, 135 students. And now we're seeing, I think last year was 185, 86. So 174, but we're toggling in that 10 student range now. We've been doing that for years.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions before I move on to the next slide? We can come back to, we can answer questions at the end. These are interesting numbers to look at too, and I really think COVID has a lot to do with this, and I think this is what Rebecca was concerned about when she started putting her March 2022 report together, was what was the impact of COVID. So you can see in 2020, 21, 2 years ago, we had 57 students that were being homeschooled. We had 55 students being homeschooled last year, and we have 36 this year, so 19 students are not being homeschooled, or a reduction of 19 students in homeschooling. That doesn't surprise me. We had a lot of parents who made a choice to homeschool their children for the last 2 years during COVID for a variety of reasons. Some of them even wrote on there, can't wait for a typical year, I'm going to send my kid back, but not this year, for whatever reason. It could have been they didn't like the protocols we had for COVID. It could have been that we didn't have strict enough protocols. There were different reasons. But I'm not surprised. The 36 is actually very much in line with our typical numbers going back before COVID. We were usually in the 30s. For charter schools, the number I'm going to predict, one is not it. I can tell you that much. We've not heard from our largest charter school, which is Baxter Academy in Portland. We tend to have between 10 and 12 students, 10 to 12, 13 students every year that go to Baxter. So I would say that that number is probably the same as last year if I had to predict a number. We tried to get that number. They're usually pretty good about getting it to us. We just didn't have it as of today. But I would predict that we're around the 13-ish mark for charter schools, so probably no change. For private schools, we had 109 students 2 years ago. We didn't have all of the numbers in. Most of our private schools are pretty good about giving us those numbers. We do hound them a lot, well, multiple times. We'll try to get those numbers, but we don't always get them. In 2020, 21, we didn't hear back from couple private schools, so we didn't have complete numbers. Last year, we did hear back from all of our private schools. 152 students were privately schooled last year, and 98 this year. I will say, in looking at our private schools that haven't reported, they're small. So we have 2 or 3 that haven't reported that we typically have kids go to. So I think we'll probably be in the low 100s for numbers this year. So I would think somewhere around 100 to 110, somewhere in that range. So lower than last year, and I think, again, no surprise. I think some parents made a decision over the last couple of years to send their children to private schools. I think the 109 2 years ago is not an accurate number. It was probably closer to 150 students 2 years ago as well. That is no surprise. We had a lot of parents saying, we don't want to deal with these COVID protocols, or you're not, we also had a hybrid model 2 years ago. That wasn't very popular with many families. So there's a variety of reasons. So I'm not surprised to see the number dropping and for more kids to be coming back to the district this year. And we did, Rebecca actually forecasted that as well. For superintendent agreements again, that's an agreement between 2 superintendents, whether a student comes in or out of our district. So we had 49 students coming in 2 years ago to our district, 43 last year, and we have 19 that have requested and been approved to come in this year. So that's a 24 student drop in superintendent agreements for students coming in. Now, why is that number low? And that's actually low based on our historical numbers as well. We've historically, before COVID, had a lot more than 19 students. Last year, for actually the last 2 years, we've had a lot of families that have been building a home in Cumberland, North Yarmouth. However, we do not, if they have not actually moved here, we don't count them as a resident. We count them as, we require them to get a superintendent's agreement, even if their home is being built, because it takes several months for a home to be built, and in the meantime, the students are going to school in their old school district, or they can request to come here. For some reason, we had a large group of students that were in that spot last school year especially, and have since moved here permanently and are now residents. We do not count them in our superintendent agreement. Obviously, it counts. So that was, when we were looking at the numbers a little bit more today and digging into why this number dropped, that is definitely one factor. I couldn't tell you the others. We're not always told. For superintendent agreements out, for students going out of the district or requesting to go out of the district to another district, we had 11 2 years ago, 18 last year, and we have 10 this year. That tends to be more typical for us, around 10. So that's a change of 8 students who've requested to go out. And then so the summary is the enrollment in our district continues to increase. We have found that the 3 reports that we've done since 2016, and I want to thank the board for its due diligence. The board has asked repeatedly that these reports be done so that we're absolutely sure about projections and that we're not just relying on something from years ago. So in this case, we're relying on something from only 6 months ago. Projections continue to be very reliable. Want to thank Rebecca Wandell for her outstanding work. She has worked on all 3 of those reports for us. Mabel I. Wilson School has seen an 86% increase of all the student. We have 57 new students this year, or 57 students increased. And out of the 57 students, 49 of them are at Mabel I. Wilson School, which means 86%. And that has been a trend for several years. Although now we're starting to see the 4 or 5 numbers. They're going back and forth, but we're seeing them stabilize, and we will start seeing an increase. When you look at Rebecca's report, you start seeing 4 or 5 stabilizing and then increasing. 6-8 does the same thing, and then down the road, 9-12 does the same thing. Students are tending to go to their own public schools this year rather than the past 2 years. We're seeing students, families are opting to send their kids to public school, and that's not just here, it's everywhere, instead of private schools, charter schools, or homeschooling. I think a lot of that was COVID. Obviously, families send their students to other places for many reasons other than COVID, but for students who did go to another placement because of COVID, they have largely come back. So that is my enrollment summary for you. Any questions? Jason?
What happens with the finances for the superintendent agreements? Like costs associated with those kids?
So we, there's no exchange of funds between districts for superintendent agreements. So if we accept a student, we take on the cost. The state reimburses us through the subsidy. So it counts for us as a student increase, and it counts for the other district as a student decrease. So it doesn't cover the complete cost, but it covers most of the cost of the student.
And like teachers that work in our district and opt to bring their kids here, they would be in that number?
Yep, they still have to request it. They still have to request an approval. If we have class sizes that are already at maximum or capacity, then I will not take a student if we're already there, but they can request it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Go for it.
Jeff, could you go back to that slide that we were asking questions about before?
This one?
That's the one. So we're 49 up at Mabel I. Wilson, and I can't remember exactly how the projections looked when we looked at them 6 months ago. But at what point are we, so hopefully we'll have a new school opening in 2026. At what point are we going to need more portables if we keep adding students to Mabel I. Wilson?
That's a somewhat difficult question to answer, but I'm going to be really honest and say that I believe we may have to be looking at it in the next budget cycle. Mm-hmm. When we look at the increase for next year at Mabel I. Wilson School, I do not know if we have enough space. And we've been saying that all along. We held and did not put any more portables on that property this summer. And it's the first year that we've just held and said we're going to try to get by without putting any more. But it is possible that we're going to have to add another 2-unit building on that property. I'm not going to say that for sure. We have to look at all the numbers and where we put students and what class sizes look like. The modulars have a cap that is different from the main building. So we tend to keep those classes a little bit smaller, slightly smaller. And whatever grade is out there, it makes a difference as to how many classrooms that we can really fit in the entire school with the modulars in the main building. So during the budget process, we look at all of that information. and then decide if it's we can get by with the modulars we've got, which during the last cycle we were able to do that. We had enough space so that we could get by even with increases. I am going to say at this point, I'm probably 75% sure that we might be asking for another 2-room modular. But I don't want to say that for sure until we've studied it all during the budget process and are really sure that we need to do that.
And Scott, can you remind us what the cost is for those portables every year, or Jeff?
$335,000.
Yeah.
That's for the entire 21 rooms.
That's for everything on the campus.
That we have right
That's
now.
$335,000 a year that we have to spend
That's the
Each
lease.
year.
each year.
That's correct.
But the cost to install them is somewhat
More than
significant
that.
too because of the prep work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an added cost.
Right.
Yeah.
And when does this start putting pressure at our middle school? I know I was asking about the bubble earlier. So at what point do we need to think about more modulars at the middle school as well? Or do we have the capacity there for a bit longer?
That's a question I cannot answer right now. We do have, currently we have 7 rooms at the middle school. We have 6 on one side and we have another room on the other side of the building. So we have 7 rooms total right now. And the 4th and 5th grade area has been slowly and incrementally taking over space in the 6-8 wings, both wings. So upstairs, you'll see 4th and 5th grade classrooms. Now, the 4th and 5th grade and the 6th through 8th grade principals have been shifting things around. There's 6-8 classrooms now out in the modulars, so that's how they've made the shift.
Mm-hmm.
How long that can continue, I don't know.
2026 when it gets all reconfigured.
That question I can't answer right now. I think the Mabel Wilson School I have a little more knowledge about.
Okay.
So we'll have to look at it. Avery?
Yeah, I know that the high school is pretty big, but I'm wondering if this enrollment bubble will ever become an issue for the high school's capacity.
It will. I mean, the enrollment for the high school, the projections that Rebecca Wandell did would be, the school right now is 602, I think. The projected enrollments, if you look 10 years out, the school will be over 700, which is about the highest it was at one point years ago. So the difference with a high school, and nobody likes this answer at the high school level when I say this, especially staff. It's a tough answer, but the high school is different because when a teacher is not teaching a block of 82 minutes or so, and it's not the case in every classroom, but often that classroom is empty. It's considered a prep time for a teacher or whatnot. We sometimes schedule classes in there and sometimes we don't. And when we looked at classes that we can schedule into those rooms, when enrollment increases, we can still get by with the space that we've got. So that does not seem to be the same issue at the high school as we would find at the other levels. That's the easy answer, my short answer. And a lot of high schools operate that way. Now, they have to provide their staff other places to work during a prep time if they're not in their classroom.
Okay, so like those classrooms can be, full of students while the teachers who need their prep time can do that somewhere else.
So we don't always schedule, right now, often we don't schedule a class in when a teacher has a prep. But we could. Other high schools do that. And if that's the case, we just have to find other places for teachers to prep. Tommy?
How would study halls move? Because I know that a lot of times when teachers don't have a period, there would be study halls during that period. Would there be more large group study halls like in the commons or the cafeteria?
No, because we didn't account for those smaller study halls. We just accounted when a teacher has a prep.
Okay.
So teachers have prep time that's personal, and then they have group prep time as well. So we took those out of the equation. So the study halls, we're not looking to increase study halls because we're still accounting for a teacher having a group of students in their room during that time. We're only accounting for the times when there's nobody in that room. So a teacher has a prep. So that's the time we just need to find a place for the teacher to work.
Okay, and then my next question, will the modular classrooms be moved once if the new school is built, or would there still be a need for that at MIW?
No, the current plan is that no modulars are needed.
Okay.
So we should be able to adequately have all of our students in all of our facilities with no modulars and room to spare. We have at Mabel I. Wilson School, I think there's 3 rooms built into the plan for flex that can be used, and possibly a 4th room. And at the 6-8 building, which will become the 6-8 building, currently 4-8, we have several rooms that will be flex rooms in that facility, and should take us right through the foreseeable future based on our plans. So there will be no modulars based on the current information we have today, all the current projections, and building in flex space at all of our facilities, including the new building. Yes, Kim.
As of this year, how many classrooms are being used for pre-K?
1.
Just one
We
classroom?
have 2 sessions, an AM and PM, but they use the same classroom.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the same staff.
So when you're looking at projections for possibly adding portables, is that increasing the number of kids who come to pre-K, or is that first
No,
through third?
We would leave the pre-K program exactly as it is. We have no plans to increase pre-K.
Okay, so projected numbers don't include a
No,
pre-K increase?
no.
Okay.
And the only reason we included more rooms at the new school for pre-K is we'd like to look at a full-day program down the road and give us that option and that flexibility. And the state may change its rules, which they've indicated, that we may have to take 3-year-olds for special education as well, who are an IEP. And if we do that, we'll take regular education students to complement those rooms as well. So we'll need more rooms at the primary school, the new one. So we've set aside 5 rooms at this point in the plan at the primary school, but we have no plans to increase space, full-day programming, anything, any numbers with the current school that we have pre-K, Mabel Wilson.
Other questions? Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So moving down the list, so that some of our administrators can go home a little bit sooner. Are you guys okay if we move the executive session up? We'll leave the room, do that, and then come back and do the rest of the agenda. Okay, so if you guys are okay with that, I'll take a motion on 6H.
I'm just trying to find it. Okay. I recommend vote to enter executive session, discuss negotiations between MSAD 51 secretaries, educational technicians, and library technicians at the MSAD 51 Board of Directors pursuant state statute MRSA 405-60.
Thank you, Vanessa. In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Leanne. Discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we'll leave the room. Or,
Well, we can-
nobody's here. If you just shut off the mics. Yeah, as long as we're not
Sure.
being recorded, I guess that's the important part.
Do you want me to let the students go?
What about the report? Yeah, they should.
They can just
5 of us, right? 6.
What about the student reps? Are they?
No, they're coming back.
They're gone.
Okay, so we're back from executive session that we took out of order, so we will continue down the agenda on item 6A, which is to approve professional positions. Jeff, you want to take us through that?
Yep, we had a late resignation, actually first week of school. We had someone, a teacher, leave, and so this is to replace that person. In 4th grade, we had 3 candidates interviewed, and I do not have the number of applicants for you. I'm sorry about that. But we are hiring an existing teacher in another school district who will be transitioning to our district, and there is a waiting period when we hire this time of year. So there is a 30-day hold, and we actually have 60-day hold on 2 other teachers that we're still waiting for from another 2 other districts. But we are pleased to be able to bring this teacher forward. This is a person who actually worked in our district before in a different role, and we're happy to have this person back.
Thank you. So do I hear a motion?
A motion to approve the appointment of professional positions outlined by the superintendent.
Thank you, Vanessa.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Kim. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Motion carries. So before we get to the motion, Scott, can you take us through the technicalities of what we're doing here on this next one for the new school referendum?
Yes. The board needs to basically vote to send a notice of election to the community and also a notice of public hearing. And this is on the new primary school project. We have warrants and we have notices of the public hearing that need to be signed. But the whole purpose of this is that we're going to, this is calling the election on the new school, the $73 million school. And then also we'll have a public hearing on October 17th, and the election is obviously on November 8th. And so the warrants will be countersigned by the selectmen and the council, and then they will be posted in the communities as notice.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. So this motion is pretty important that it's worded properly. Is there somebody down there at the end that wants to do that?
I'll be happy to. All right. Recommended to vote the warrant and notice of election of Maine School Administrative District Number 51 presented to the meeting be approved, that a referendum election for the district be called for November 8th, 2022 for the purpose of approving the issuance of bonds or notes of the district for school construction project purposes as directed therein. It is further voted that the notice of public hearing presented to the meeting be approved, and that a public hearing on the issuance of bonds or notes for school construction project purposes be held on October 17th, 2022 at 7 p.m. as provided therein.
Thank you, Vanessa. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Leanne. Scott, sound good to you?
Sounds good.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. And so after the meeting, stick around, don't run out, because we need to put signatures on lots of paperwork that Scott has, so don't run away. Okay, moving down the list, item 6C. We discussed this last time, and Fran sent an email to us this morning sort of explaining more clearly that we do have to appoint one delegate for the MSMA, and outlining the 2 things that are coming up, one of which is virtual, and you sort of represent this board in voting on some matters possibly, and then the fall conference coming up. So the question is, does somebody want to be the delegate moving forward? Anne?
Yes, I would.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, do we have to vote on that then, to appoint the delegate?
You do. Motion, second, and a vote.
We need an alternative.
I'd be
An
interested-
alternate.
Okay, and an alternate?
I'd be interested.
Okay, sounds good to me. Everybody okay with that? Somebody want to put forward the motion for those two people to be the delegate and the alternate?
I'll move that Ann Maximovich is our representative and that Leanne Kinder is the alternate.
Okay, representative being delegate. Okay,
That
thank
too.
you,
Thank you.
Kim. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom. All right, further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. And then the fall conference is coming up as a separate thing, right? Anybody can go to that.
That's right. Everybody can go to it. Fran will register any board member that would like to go, and I don't know. I think she might have put that information out. I can't remember.
She did, yeah.
Okay.
So just email Fran and let her know if you want to go one day, both days, whatever.
Can I ask a question? That's administrators too, is that correct?
Yes, I usually go.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you going this
It's
year?
usually district administrators. It's
District
not usually principals.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's exciting. The food is good, but the sessions are better.
Okay. So item 6D, appoint a district physician. Jeff, can you take us through the technicalities of this? We are required to have a physician?
Yes, state law requires that every school district have a physician, and that's an annual appointment. That the board must appoint by state law a physician annually for the district. So I'm recommending to the board Dr. Charles Desai. Dr. Desai has been our school physician for 2 or 3 years now, and really helped to guide the nurses and the administrators through the COVID situation, and is recommending him for continuing employment. He also, in a typical year, really works with the nurses directly for medication issues that might come up. If they're trying to work with a parent in a doctor's office, sometimes he'll intervene and help the nurses with that. He also provides his licensure for the nurses for other purposes where that needs to be. He does training for the AED machines. Those are the kind of things that Dr. Desai. He's also consultant on health matters that come up that the nurses need some sort of a clinical answer, not just an administrative answer.
And rough current cost to have him in this position?
I believe we're paying $3,500, if I remember correctly, Mr. Poulin. Does that sound right? $3,500.
A token of what he does, okay? It is a small
We
token.
would not be able to do that otherwise.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so there was some contention last year, mostly because related to COVID. And, the discussion was basically if you want to change paths from what we're doing now with Dr. Chuck.
Yeah. Dr. Chuck.
It would be significantly more. And so, okay. So I will entertain a motion.
And so that's a good reason I have a question. So the nurses feel supported with him in this role?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, they have felt supported with him all through COVID now that, and actually really his role last year was a lot less, especially the second half of the year, as we moved away from a lot of the rigidity of COVID. And so he's really took on more of the typical duties of a physician, but yes, he's very well. So,
Right.
the nurses feel very comfortable with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems like a
Yeah,
good deal.
the nurses actually interviewed Dr. Chuck. When we first hired Dr. Chuck, they were actually part of an interview process to hire him and select him. And as you said, Jeff, they're extremely comfortable with him. So.
Thank you.
Anyone? A motion?
I move to approve the appointment of Dr. Charles Desai as the district physician/health officer as recommended by the superintendent.
Thanks, Tom. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. So moving on to 6E, vote to dissolve the Outdoor Learning Committee. So we've talked about this a couple of times previously, at the retreat being one of them, and certainly we can discuss it more here. The general thought is a couple, that we have a ton of committees, and then also that outdoor learning potentially could become, part of the charge of facilities as far as providing a space, and then, emphasis within curriculum to, encourage teachers to, do pointed, lessons that include the outdoors. Do you want to add anything to this, Jeff?
No, I think the Outdoor Learning Committee had a lot of importance and significance. I'm trying not to say the word COVID, but I feel like I'm having to say it tonight, Jason, prompting me. But it really did have a lot of, interest in, and there's a lot of things that we did during the pandemic with federal money that was provided to the district. And that money had to be used very quickly, and some of those areas that we looked at, such as the amphitheater, were paid for by federal dollars and were part of the outdoor learning space that are now being enjoyed by students and staff. So I think the Outdoor Learning Committee did a lot of work during that period of time to secure some physical features on our campus, but I don't think that the purpose of that committee is kind of probably sunsetted.
And to be clear, we're not discouraging outdoor learning by any means.
No.
But, okay.
I was just going to add another place where you'll see this is with the new school project. I think outdoor learning will be one of the focuses there as well, as they talked about the features of the area. So I hope to see more of that carried through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, pointed lessons that include piece of the outdoors is fantastic, and also we had to provide a space for teachers that just want to have class outdoors, but those are sort of two different things. I don't think we need this committee specifically anymore. That can be blended into other areas, sort of. So is there a motion?
I recommend to dissolve the Outdoor Learning Committee.
Thank you, Vanessa. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Leanne. Further thoughts, discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Motion carries. So this next one, 6F, is also to dissolve a committee, which may seem counterintuitive to people. And we've discussed this one before as well. Again, we have a lot of committees. And as far as the communication committee goes, and I wish Mike was here to talk on this matter, but my feeling is, and you guys can share your views as well, but communications is the job of all of us all the time, and especially the chairs of each individual committee. I think it really shouldn't necessarily land on one person and we have to funnel everything back to them. I just think that's what every chair should do. On an ad hoc basis, certainly I think we have areas where we'll have to put extra effort into communications, like Kim's job on the new school committee and that sort of thing. Thoughts from others?
Did they figure out who's going to be responsible for the MIW sign?
Someone's been changing it.
Someone's been changing it.
Corey, that's who it's going to be.
Okay, great. That seemed like an open item.
So as far as streamlining communication so that it doesn't appear that just one of us is answering for the board, whatever that may look like, improving the website or, whatever that includes, if it involves a Facebook group. I know nobody wants to hear those words, but is that something that should fall to a specific person, or is that something that as a board we are trying to figure out how to communicate these things? So let's say, for example, I start a Facebook page for the school board, which the sole purpose is to promote the information nights, the vote, just making sure that people are aware of what's going on. When the vote is done, is someone else going to perhaps use that to communicate, for their group, their committee? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
So I think if we opened up a new avenue of communication, I think the board would have to be, on board with that. We'd have to discuss it. And I think all those sorts of things we could do like on an ad hoc basis. I think, we talked about this when we were talking about committees a month ago or whatever. I like the idea of improving some of the communications. I like the idea of how the crier is laid out for the town, and, you know, maybe more graphics, and can we somehow do one crier that has a hierarchy so parents only get one thing every week? You know, tackling that sort of project could just be an ad hoc committee where we focus on that, we improve it, and then it goes away.
So we're getting rid of communication as a standing committee, but perhaps creating a temporary ad hoc just to streamline and.
Well, that's up to the board, but I think there's all kinds of opportunities for little projects here and there. But I feel like the communication committee was almost like a crutch, like, okay, Mike, make sure you inform everybody, but it's really, it falls on all of us, especially the chairs of the committees, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with that. I just want to make sure that we're not piecemealing it, and it's like this is coming from Kim, this is coming from Jason, this is coming from Ann, so that the community isn't confused.
Yeah.
You know, they're seeing that it is coming from the board.
Well, everything sort of falls under a committee, and you know, so finance, we would ask Vanessa to elaborate on things.
Sure.
If anything, I think this would put a greater responsibility on each of us to inform in our areas that we know about. Not less, instead of looking to someone else.
And we could also include the communication with the board if it needs to be written down in dates. It's in the superintendent's report, a good piece of what we're doing. Anyways, it's highlighted at some point.
This isn't to reduce communication, it's just.
Yeah, what we were feeling is that, like, Mike Williams didn't have anything to communicate on.
Yeah.
Like, because the finance communicated, the equity committee communicated, and then Mike was like, hi.
Yep.
Right.
Like, he didn't have a committee to communicate on, so it's not necessarily getting rid of how we communicate, it's, there really wasn't.
And of course, we have a communication item on our agenda every meeting that is kind of a catch-all for future topics or whatever. Further discussion. All right. Is there a motion?
I move to dissolve the communication committee.
Thank you, Kim. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. Motion carries. I think on this next one, the Climate and Environmental Committee, because Mike isn't here, nor is Christina, which is who sort of expressed interest in doing that. I'd like to put that off if you guys are okay with that, because I think we should have a charge figured out ahead of time, or at least a draft of a charge. Is there any objections to postponing that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So this next one is not on the agenda, but it's largely symbolic. I would like to move that we dissolve the COVID Advisory Committee.
Oh, gosh. I think that has been dissolved. We haven't met for months.
It's never been dissolved officially, has it?
No, but if you really want to.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Discussion? All in favor?
2 hands.
Who was the first and second? I'm sorry. I was writing it down.
I'm the first. Vanessa's the second. All right. All opposed? Okay. Motion carries unanimous, I think. Yes? No? Okay. And we already did our executive session. So superintendent's report, please.
All right. Superintendent's report for this evening. We have just a few highlights, and then I'll also talk about a couple of other items. So these are things I was just walking by, actually, and saw a class outdoors at Mabel Wilson School, and Maureen Driscoll is the librarian there. And she was doing some outdoor learning. She was reading to kids outside. They had a nice patch of grass. I'm seeing a lot of students outside these days, as the weather is okay, not today, of course. The Madrigals were at the Sea Dogs game a couple of weeks ago and had an opportunity to sing for the crowd before a Sea Dogs game, or it might have been in the middle of the Sea Dogs game. And they, I wasn't there, but I heard it was, they did an amazing job representing the school. Team Katahdin, while some of their team members were on Kyle Island, which took place last week, some of the team was staying behind and then had an opportunity to go a different day. They were doing some community service and cleaning up the campus. So you can see some bags of trash and debris that really needed to be taken care of. So we want to thank Team Katahdin for all their work. This week on Thursday is a very busy day for our district. We have multiple things going on all afternoon. Very exciting. One of the events that we have going on is the Hashi reception. This is part of our exchange with Japan and the Amori City Precinct that we've had a partnership with for decades. And our students have been creating block prints, and these block prints are now on display at the Art Center. They've been on display for a couple weeks now at the Art Center. And we have a very special delegation from Japan that will be from the Amori Precinct that will be attending this ceremony. And members of the public are invited. We'll have students and staff there. And Dr. Suzuki from Japan is the delegation chief from Amori Precinct, and he will be there to say a few words. And he's also getting a tour of the area. Linda McCann Olson has spearheaded this entire project in the district. She's one of the art teachers here at Mabel I. Wilson School. So I'd like to thank Linda for all of that, and everyone is invited. I believe it is, I should have written the time down, but it's Thursday. It's on our district calendar. Let's put it that way. Yeah. It's on the district calendar. It's late afternoon. One of the safety upgrades, and at some point, Scott will be doing a complete rundown of all of our summer projects that happened this previous summer. But one of the many projects that was taken care of, including one of the many safety upgrades that we made, was a complete revamping of the Mabel I. Wilson School office in order to give our office staff better line sight and eyesight on the corridor and the main doors going into the building. So that included a complete reconfiguration and rehab of the Mabel I. Wilson School office so that it's more safety conscious. So really pleased with those changes.
Can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
that one? In the presentation about the new school and the Mabel Wilson, when it talks about the safety and security upgrades, is that what's been done, or is there further?
We have further work to be done at the school for safety. That's certainly one of the we had actually talked about that prior to those renovation monies even being received, and talking about upgrading that office. But we have there's a lot of other safety upgrades that will be done in that building as well as part of that money.
So this is not part of what we're
No.
part of the referendum? Yeah.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Also on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, just a reminder that there's an Alice info session. I'll be putting that on social media again tomorrow. And it's providing additional information. People that would be parents that are interested in attending that evening can attend in person. We also will be live streaming it, and we will be recording it. Chief Chip Rumsey and SRO Amy Owen will be at the meeting, including several of our administrators. But the chief and Officer Owen will be really the ones leading this parent information evening. They'll be talking about the Alice program in more detail, and specifically each school's plan for rolling out Alice. It looks different in each of our 4 schools, and they'll be talking about it, as well as the chief will have gun safety locks from Project Child Safe on hand for families that would like to have them. They're free. And I think he's got at least 100, he told me, that he has on hand. So he'll be giving them out to families that would like those. And that also is an initiative of the Safety and Security Committee. And finally, this evening, we surveyed our staff. We had about 400 staff that went through the training, about 95% of our staff. I probably should have said 4 out of 400, not 422. We had 169 staff members respond to the survey, which is about 40% of our staff. And we had 4 questions that we asked, plus we had an open-ended question for any other comments. I don't have the open-ended question because there was a lot of comments that were written, but I'll just give you the results of the 4 main questions. Did you experience discomfort or apprehension about the training prior to your participation? About a third of our staff who responded said that they were apprehensive about the ALICE training and just kind of going into it. About a third said somewhat, and a third said that they did not have any apprehension. For those who said they did you feel more comfortable after the ALICE training? Again, a kind of reminder, this is 4.5 hours of training, 3 different modules, 2 hours of hands-on online training, and then we had an overview. So out of those who said yes, about 73% said that they did not, they did feel more comfortable after the training, felt that it was something that met their needs. We had a small percentage that said no. We didn't put the number in there, I'm sorry, if you can do the math. And we had about 22% that said somewhat felt more comfortable. We asked staff, do you feel that the ALICE training has prepared you to handle serious safety incidents more than a traditional lockdown? And we had about 80% of our staff say yes, and 19% of our staff said somewhat, and we had 1% of our staff said no, it did not. And the final question was, overall, was the ALICE training relevant and helpful to you? 96% said yes. Out of the 169 respondents, we had, I think it was 4%, 3% that said somewhat, and 1% said no. So you can see that, you know, an overwhelming number of our staff that responded, which is about 40%, said that they found the training to be useful and helpful and kind of help them alleviate any concerns that they might have had. This will be important as we go into the rollout for students in October. And again, that parent information night this Thursday evening will be to talk more about that in detail. We do have plans. We've discussed this with the leadership team, and we will be rolling that out in October. So that's the superintendent's report this evening.
Jeff, did you get any insights through some of the comments of those who may have answered no or somewhat as to why they didn't find it relevant or helpful?
Yeah, the comments that I saw were that it was a lot to take on the first day back after summer. There was probably, I think I read 3 comments in there that said this really was a lot. And, you know, and therefore it wasn't useful because it was like coming right back and then jump right into this topic, which felt really, really heavy. And I think that may have accounted for that 1%. I mean, obviously when you're training 400 people, not everyone's going to feel that this is a training program they agree with, or they, you know, but we did have a lot of skepticism going into it. A lot of people that were a little bit apprehensive about it. It's a tough topic. But I think, you know, we had some great trainers. We thank our law enforcement from Cumberland PD, Yarmouth PD for doing this, including all of our instructors who are trained as well to help. And I think for the most part, you can see that vast majority of our staff felt it was a good training. I don't know what the other 60% thought, but my guess is if they didn't respond, they probably were okay with it.
Right.
Would be my
Some
guess.
bias there, and
my
he may have
guess.
filled it out, right?
Yeah. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Further questions of Jeff? Okay. So we'll move on to item 8, committee reports. This is pretty early in the season for committee reports, but Vanessa, do you have anything to add for finance?
Yep. Scott and I are going to meet on Wednesday. He's going to bring me up to speed on the board roles, and then we're going to formulate reach out to our committee members and start the next first meeting the following week.
Great. Thank you. Policy, Jared is not here, but I know I sat in on a meeting with Jared and Jeff, just sort of to bring him up to speed on the process. Want to add anything to that?
No, I think we'll follow the same, sounds like we'll follow the same process, which we have policies from last year that are still in the docket. Plus, there's a whole list of policies that you know, our legal counsel a couple of years ago recommended that we look at. So we're certainly going through all those policies and deciding what rises to the top.
Okay.
And where do we see what policies are on the docket?
We can share that with the whole board if you'd
Okay,
like.
that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm sure. Or if you want me to ask Jared to do that, he can do that.
Facilities, Mike is not here. Scott, do you have any update on that? Is there anything planned?
Not at this time.
Okay.
One thing about policies is it's up to the chair and Jeff what's the most important that needs to be reviewed. Sometimes it's within the time frame of the state that we have to have it done by a certain date.
Okay.
So that really drives when we review policies.
Yep. That is a good point. There's several policies right now that there was a statutory change, and I think there's about 4 right now that we've got to finish.
Yeah.
They've been sitting on the docket, so that does drive some of the decision making.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And one thing that I asked of the process in that meeting was we're going to add a column to the spreadsheet to sort of designate what is, you know, a state mandated thing sort of versus what is, you know, optional, you know, because of whoever on this board or whatever wanted to do it. So, and to me, those are very different things. Like one, okay, we got to do this versus, you know, let's have a lot of discussion around this other one that's optional.
And is there any on the to-do list yet?
So the to-do list?
Like Jason just mentioned that.
It's a long list, but all the stuff that's at the top right now is state stuff, right?
Yeah, we've already prioritized. High priority are the ones that are state-driven, state mandates, or a state law that changed, and our policies need to comply and conform to state law. So those are the ones that we have at the top. I think there's 6 right now that we've prioritized right away as being just lawful changes that need to get done.
And have you flagged any other ones, Jason, that you're looking at?
I don't even recall the list myself.
Okay.
I'm happy to share that. It's a public document, so I can share it with the board.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, curriculum. Tom, anything?
No, but this is a good reminder that I'm the co-chair and I need to get in touch with Susie. So thank you.
Okay. Equity, Jared and Tim. Nothing has happened on that yet. Student reports. Avery and Tommy are not here. Ad hoc committees. Kim, with the new schools, or anything you want to talk about?
A couple things, yes.
Yeah.
So we have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday evening for those of us involved in phase 1. Who officially is running that meeting? Is that me running the meeting?
I don't feel strongly about it. I don't
Okay.
care. It's up to you.
Because I have an agenda going. I mean, I have it in my head, but I didn't want to presume that was that.
To me, it's going to be informal. It's really brainstorming. If you want to run it, go for it.
Okay. And then as far as policy, is that a meeting that needs to be advertised to the community?
The regular policy committee?
No, sorry. I think I said it wrong. As far as our procedures or our bylaws, is this a committee meeting that needs to be
Recorded.
recorded and
Public notification.
what she said? Thank you.
Because it's
going to be there.
Because it's an ad hoc committee of the board. It technically doesn't, but I would very much recommend that it's noticed just because of the nature of the topic. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yep.
Okay, so how do I go about?
So Fran is your key to success.
Okay. All right.
And I'll make a note too, so that she
Okay.
can touch base with you tomorrow as soon as possible, so we can get that noticed.
Okay.
Okay.
Very
All
good.
right.
Very good. And then in light of, well, I mean, we've talked about this before. I was not aware that might fall under my job as far as phase 1 to potentially reschedule the parent information night that's on the second night of Rosh Hashanah. It's been on the calendar for a long time. It doesn't seem feasible, but is there a way to
So I've had a few requests about that. We do have two, as you mentioned, and I think it might be the first one, the 27th.
The first one,
Yeah. That I had a request to reschedule that. I think because we have a second session that's a duplicate session on the 12th of October, you know, and I probably had 3 or 4 emails or requests about rescheduling. My feeling at this point, when we looked at the calendar for the rest of September and October, there literally was not another evening that the schedules matched up with the people that have got to be there and running this and available evenings. And so there was literally no other time. I think and I don't want to go into the weeds on this too much, but one of the things that I noticed when I looked at this year's calendar is that Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah are 4 days out of a 2-week window. And it's very difficult this year, just the way that the holiday calendar fell. Usually one or the other is earlier in September, and there's some spacing between, but because we've got a very short period of time and there's 4 days that we're trying to work around, and we've got a building project we've got to get done with absentee balloting that starts, you know, mid-October, if not a little bit before that. There was just no other time with all the other events that are already scheduled, pre-scheduled. So trying to find another evening, I completely understand the concern. We would have tried to stay away from it otherwise. But there are just a lot of competing demands and very little time to do that. And just the way the holiday calendar fell, it was very difficult. That's been my explanation. And when I looked at it and tried to figure out why we're having this challenging with scheduling, that was really what we found.
Yeah, when I was looking at dates, I noticed Yom Kippur as well. I just want to somehow acknowledge that given the anti-Semitic acts that have been happening at the school, this just feels terrible that, you know, of all the religious events, it is a Jewish holiday. I just wish there was a way that we could somehow communicate to the community, maybe just a little bit better, that we get it. I don't even know what to say about that. It just feels like another little twist of this very sensitive situation.
I think if there was not a duplicate session, I would feel much more strongly that we've got to reschedule. But you know, when I sat down and looked at the calendar, there was literally we'd be displacing something else. In order to do this. It's like a domino effect with our calendar right now, and it's very scrunched. There are no other evenings unless we're looking at a Friday evening or something.
Right.
And those are often football evenings. So that was it. That was all that there was.
No, I have to completely understand how difficult it was to schedule that. I just want to make sure that people understand that.
How many days do we have before the absentee ballots go out?
18.
Yes,
18
thank
days.
you.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Sorry.
Yeah, and we have a short window to get these informational sessions in, and a lot of work that gets done. Then you throw Alice in there, the parent nights. You throw the schools evenings in there. You throw athletics in there. There was no other available date before the middle of October. And again, I think having 2 different sessions, you know, they're exactly the same. If people, you know, people miss these dates for lots of reasons. I understand the important nature of the Jewish holidays, but people have work schedules where they can't get on a certain day either. And so that's why we offered 2, to make sure that people would be able to at least access one. And if somebody can't access either one of those, they will be recorded and they will be out there as well. So there's different ways to access the information, but very sympathetic to the concern. I think in another year, you know, the holidays would have been more spread out as they typically are. They're in a very short window here to deal with.
Just an unfortunate convergence.
I want to just thank you, Kim, for bringing that up. You know, and I think then it's just something that as a district we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again, since it has happened before. So we don't want to keep making these same mistakes.
Well,
I can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee it. We have so many events that have to be scheduled. And I know there was a concern about the Cumberland Fair and the Ag Day and our students going to the fair from the 2nd grade. Again, those are dates that are not even scheduled by the district. They're scheduled elsewhere. We try our best, but there is no guarantee that we can stay away from some of these scheduling issues. These are things that happen, annually that we're scheduling. We have open houses. We have all kinds of things going on. We do our best to schedule around the 2,200 or so students that we have and their families. I cannot guarantee that we're going to continue. There are other people from other groups that are always talking to me about scheduling. It shouldn't have been scheduled on this date or this date. We have this issue a lot. We try our very best to be sensitive to that, but I cannot guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said that to the people who have talked to me directly.
Yeah, and I know there was a review of the school calendar at the end of last year, and maybe just going forward, I don't know how the calendaring system works, but if there can be a more clear block out of scheduling these other events.
Yeah. Yeah, we tried to, when we looked at the calendar, we did involve someone who had really brought this to our attention a year ago. But those were the big parts of the calendar that we made sure we stayed away from. Then there's all these events and meetings that get scheduled after the calendar is adopted. I mean, we didn't schedule these, we scheduled them about a month ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago. But we don't schedule those kind of things that far in advance when we adopt the calendar, obviously. So those things are going to happen. But I cannot guarantee it. It was like also fielded concerns about the Cumberland Fair and the scheduling of that. There's certain, the fair is only 1 week. We only have so much wiggle room. We do our best, but we have a lot of people that we're trying to navigate and listen to and trying to work all these things around. So I don't want to mislead anyone when I say that either.
Thank you, Jeff. And I want to make sure that the community knows that I am basically considering this my full-time job until November 8th. So if there is someone who cannot attend either meeting, especially if that particular, that's a reason that they can't go because of Rosh Hashanah, they cannot go to the North Yarmouth one, please have them come to me. I will come to them. I will, whatever I can do to arrange one-on-one meetings, that is my priority for the next 7 weeks or whatever it is. I should know the exact number of days, but please spread the word that we are committed to being able to answer anybody's questions and be available as possible, regardless of whether it's an official meeting or not. So I don't know if that'll help, but
thank you for doing that.
Put a countdown widget on my phone.
I just wrote that note too, like send us some
49 days to referendum, 19 days to absentee ballots, but actually that's a Sunday, so it's really, they come out on a Monday, I guess. Okay. Further ad hoc stuff? I guess I can't think of anything else.
Actually, I'm going to put you on the spot, Jeff. Since Leanne and I couldn't make the safety meeting last week, is there anything else other than the Alice stuff that is pertinent?
Yep. So the safety and security did have its first meeting. We're meeting monthly for the year. A lot of work to be done. A lot of the meeting was spent going through a bunch of safety items from the Alice training last week and just kind of making decisions as a committee. There had been a pre-committee with the chief and Officer Owen. Scott and myself met and looked through those items first, make a recommendation to the committee. But we have a lot of items to go. But we'll be meeting monthly, and we also discussed the emergency plan is another piece of the safety committee's work this year. We started that last year, and we'll be completing that work this year. So a lot of things going on with safety and security in the district. And then again, Scott will be doing a presentation where he really highlights all the projects that were done this summer, including several safety-related projects. So it's been good stuff being done.
Okay, other liaison type stuff, Athletic Advisory Board, Wellness Committee, the GCA, Community Partners, and the Rec Department. Any reports on any of that?
Nothing on the
Pertinent
rec
people?
right now.
Okay. All right, moving on to somewhere. All right, so communications are a catch-all bucket for everything. You guys, I sent out to you the draft goals. So, our major discussion should happen at the retreat for that. and the raw submittals. This was not an easy task, and these are meant to be very broad, and I can't lie that I was glad to hear all of the various school strategic plan priorities prior to this, and generally they sort of align. Do we want to talk about this at all? Major concerns?
I'd like to entertain one possibility.
Okay.
Under wellness, number 4, encourage enhanced cohesion, inclusion, and mutual respect. I think that's a great way of putting it. I'm wondering if it's possible to somehow work in accordance with the equity policy, the established equity policy, something to perhaps comfort the community that we are working with the policy that's been established, that's our lens as we look at inclusion.
Well, okay. Equity is certainly an important part of what we do. It's one of many, many things that we have to do.
Yes, it is. I thought perhaps that would help us assuage the situation.
Okay. Other thoughts, concerns, comments?
On the first area, to support the administration's focus on academics, I like that this is first. And overall, I think you got a lot of different notes, and I think this is a great way to put them together. The first is around identifying any gaps related to COVID and provide resources to bridge gaps. I do like that, and I'm just wondering if we even had to mention COVID there. I think we should just be, identifying gaps generally. We know COVID probably had more of an impact that may have created some additional gaps, but I think just identifying gaps generally.
About and otherwise. How about
Yeah,
that?
sure.
I think acknowledging that we just came out of a ridiculous time is important. Maybe.
Yes, I would do either.
No, if they're not COVID gaps, yes,
we should ignore them.
Okay.
And I really think forward to what are the actual steps that we're going to use to create change in some of these goals, and once this board has come to a year, how do we reflect on these, and so just trying to think through how we would measure some of these things as a board. And so I'm trying to understand number 3 under academics as well, improve clarity related to curriculum and provide processes for transparency. I'm not clear what we're providing clarity on, I guess.
I have a thought with that. It was something shifting, say, the reading fundamentals. We first did phonics, and now we're doing the science of reading.
Great.
So it's
That's a good example.
when do we shift those? How much do we shift those? And what's the process to shift that? I mean, obviously we're not the teachers, we're not the administrations or the group that provides that information, but just for us to understand as a board that if we're going to shift how the math is being taught, how is that process, and can we understand a little bit better? Is that...
Could I just respond? Because I actually, there were some questions that were raised about the science of reading after Corey Muncie had talked about that at the last meeting, and Corey and I met to discuss it further, because I just said, talk to me a little bit more about specifically, what you were referring to. So the science of reading is not an approach or a program in our district that we're using. All it is that Corey is trying to ground all that they do in reading at the school in some sort of research basis, which is what our literacy audit, which I think we did 3 years ago now. It's been 3 years. There was a lot of things that came out of that audit. There was a year-long audit that Sally Laughlin and then Susie Robbins ended up leading the end of that audit, and they looked at every piece of our literacy curriculum in our district, K through 12 actually, to make sure that, and find those gaps, and there were gaps in our literacy program that we identified. A lot of them were at the pre-K through 3 level, or the K through 3 level we found. And in order to, so we're not discontinuing any part of our reading program that we had. We're simply trying to fill in the gaps that we found, which one of them was phonics. Our audit absolutely found that we were not using enough of the fundamental components of phonics in our reading instruction, especially in kindergarten and first grade. So that was that's been added, and that was actually added right after the audit was completed. That very next year, we added that in. So the science of reading, and I think I don't want to speak for Corey, but it's really about grounding ourselves in research. It wasn't about a departure of practice at all.
Okay, because there was that misunderstanding among the community, like, is this another program?
It isn't.
Okay.
No, and it's actually, I'll equate it very quickly to high impact teaching strategies, which John Hattie, who's a researcher, does. That is not actually a program either, but it's a practice that we use throughout our district. We took a little bit of a hiatus from high impact teaching strategies during the 2-year event that we just had, and we're now returning to that full force this year. And those, we call them HITs. They are, John Hattie outlines all these effective measures in a classroom that should be used if you want students to at least make 1 year's growth. And the goal is to make even more than 1 year's growth. That is what the science of reading is. The science of reading, I think about, it's John Hattie with just reading in mind. It's research about reading.
Okay.
It is not a reading program or a new approach. And so Corey will be back in a couple weeks or a few weeks to do recognition. And when he comes back, he wants to talk about that a little bit more. But I thought I'd throw that out before he gets back. And
why one of the board goals
Thank
is
you.
to
Thank
understand
you.
So
it.
hopefully that answers a little bit. It is more just about looking at research and making sure everything we do is grounded in it. And that's what we do across the board, actually. It's not just reading, but that was the whole point of that. And some of our reading program that we found when we did the literacy audit, yes, it was grounded in research, but there were gaps in between those research points because the program's been around for a while, and that's what we're trying to fill. And so that was a clarification. And when I talked to Corey more about it, just to make sure I understood completely, it wasn't about program change or course correction. It was about just looking at articles and helping teachers understand, why do we do what we do? Is it research-based or is it not? And so it really is about that. It's more professional learning for our teachers than it is anything else. So,
thank you.
Kim, did you want to elaborate? I know it was in your list, improving clarity around curriculum. Do you want to?
Right. It had to do with parents who are concerned with what is or isn't being taught, specific to 3 little letters, C, R, and T. Is there a way to open up that communication a little bit better so that parents can have more access to what is and isn't being taught? So not so much a program, but
alleviate their concerns.
Alleviate their concerns.
Okay.
Yep. I think the curriculum committee, Susie Robbins, who is the curriculum director for the district, director of academic services, and I did talk about. She's made a lot of inroads in transparency with curriculum over the last 3 years or so, making sure there's more stuff on our website, the essential standards that we follow. All of the state standards are linked right in. That we have units of study and sequencing on some of our content. But I think that we can do more. And I love to, we talked about the idea that that's a curriculum committee topic that we'd like to talk about more at the curriculum committee level. And exactly what are we looking for in terms of, the public part of our curriculum. So I think that's certainly a welcome discussion for us to look at.
And to me, that kind of goes with communication, that the curriculum committee could perhaps come up with ways to make sure that parents have a very clear way of finding out what's going on in their kids' classroom.
That's great.
So,
Okay.
So this one jumped out at me also. And I had a similar suggestion for goals. I think I went back and looked at it to see if this is one of my suggestions. But what I written was improve transparency around student learning outcomes, which is related to this. I'm in favor of this type of work and having something like this as a board goal. I think we do need greater specificity about what this like really means, maybe just to do some wordsmithing. One thing that and I'm all for transparency. One thing that makes me a little bit nervous about this is that there could be this perception that we are policing what teachers are doing in the classroom, and I don't want to give that impression. So, I mean, we could sort this out in the committee, but I just want to be clear about what it is that we're trying to do here.
And this is can I give the 15-second, I was going to say 10-second, but 15-second rundown of curriculum in our district. In a standards-based state, like the state of Maine, we start with the state standard, and that's the starting point for every teacher, is to start with what is the state standard, and then what's the learning target that comes from there. What do we want students to actually learn, the essential question, the learning target, and from there, those are kind of non-negotiables. You got to follow state standards, you got to have a learning target, what are the essential questions that go with that, and then we give teachers autonomy around, what is the lesson design that they're designing for the activities, the learning activities for students, based on the non-negotiable standards and learning targets. And that's the way our system is designed. So sometimes we'll have parents, and I have to talk to them about that on the phone or through an email. They'll say, show me exactly where all your curriculum is. 25 years ago, that's how it was done. The district would adopt every material, every book that you would read. It was all in this one static notebook. But because we've become a standards-based state, we don't do that anymore. That's not how we do curriculum. So it's a really different way of looking at curriculum and design. I think it's way more robust and it's way more responsive than it was 25 years ago, but it is more ambiguous to the outside parent or community member who's asking, where is your curriculum? Why is it more specific? And so I think we can talk about it more in curriculum committee, and Susie can certainly talk to that more, but it does feel different for people who grew up thinking, remembering those big notebooks of curriculum that their teachers had to thumb through, but not like that anymore.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Leanne?
Yeah, that was really helpful. And just as, thinking through again, operationalizing these, I think a lot of it will come out in the committees and which items, apply to which committees. So we can have like a full report out on board goals. Yeah. I think will be really helpful. And given that I think this is the first year where equity doesn't appear as its own board goal, I think it was a great achievement to have the equity policy approved at the end of the last board year. And, I'll just say again, the recommendation that I had given when we were giving draft goals is that that the equity should be, overarching commitment that should be in all the things that we're working on as a board and the committees to uphold the policy that was adopted by the board, the equity policy.
Okay. Further thoughts, comments, concerns?
I just want to acknowledge that this was a lot of work. I can't even imagine how you did this. So thank you, Jason. This was very challenging, I presume. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Kim. Okay. So I'll finalize this very soon. If you have other thoughts that come up in the next day or two or whatever, just let me know. Okay.
Jason, do you want that on the board page on the website?
Yeah, once it's finalized.
Okay. Yep, we can get that up.
Okay. Other stuff for communication, random things.
I just wanted to note that to be sure that everyone is aware that we are in the middle of Suicide Prevention Month and also Latin Heritage Month. And I then also kind of going back to equity, I know that it was a rough start to the night, but wondering if maybe, Jason, you would consider adding me then as co-chair to the equity committee. Just throwing it out there.
That all the committees have been locked down. I mean, I've had some great discussions. I did make some changes, in particular with one of our counselors in the school was just an absolutely wonderful discussion. But I feel very confident in the way that those 10 people will move forward thoughtfully, carefully, representing all groups and continuing to improve on what's been done thus far in a thoughtful way. And I hope that everyone in the community, including the people that were here tonight, that will give them a chance. And absolutely the onus does not fall on the community, but reach out to the members and form that relationship and give them your thoughtful input.
I appreciate the expansion of the school staff, and I don't know if it's staff and teachers that are represented on the committee. I thought it was an important expansion to the list. And just to be clear, it's only the staff members that are and maybe Avery that are you said there's 4 previous members?
There's 5 returning members. Avery, Jeff, Susie, Mari, and Katie Campbell. Yep. And then Jackie Hayes came out of that. Ann had suggested Carl, and Carl really couldn't commit to that, so he suggested Jackie. And yeah.
I think expanding the parent presence by 1 or 2 members would go a long way in our community.
I understand. I think it's also important to remember that this is a committee that, does have to, potentially put things forward, and large committees become cumbersome. Not that everybody's voice isn't important, but this is also the first year that it's gone through this process. I think that's important to point out. So previously, this committee did not fall under BDE, and this is the first year that it has. And it's our largest committee with 10 members, so I think they will do great. I encourage you to talk with them, everybody. Further, anything? Any communications? Okay, so seeing none, I will move to item 10, which is to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Discussion, all in favor?
Might want to wait till it stops
do
raining
need
so
to-
hard.
We need to have everybody sign the papers.
Yeah,
We
hang
can-
around.
Yeah, so please stick around.
Okay, maybe it'll stop raining.
All in favor to adjourn? All opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Thank you, Dirk.